Good afternoon, and thanks very much indeed for making yourself available this afternoon. My topic this afternoon is focused on driving risk at work. And first of all, I'd like to say thanks very much indeed to the IIRSM Scotland branch. I understand you were formed in February this year, so it's great to be bringing SCORSA messages to you around about driving risk at work this afternoon. SCORSA's focus is very similar to your own, that very much the supporting of local networks, promoting best practice and collaboration with other groups. So the connect, learn and share subheadings that are used to promote your work here in Scotland certainly resonate with ourselves. So this afternoon, we're going to explore how businesses led by IIRSM members here in Scotland can help to deliver Scotland's road safety framework to 2030. I'm going to provide you with some insights into a safe systems approach as applied to road safety, and then perhaps identify some ways that you can connect through SCORSA to keep up to date and learn and share information that will indeed make a difference and save lives on Scotland's roads. If you're listening from out with Scotland, the content is as relevant to you wherever you are in the world. So a safe systems approach and how to manage driving risk. There are uniform approaches and uniform methodologies that can be embedded. So please do keep listening, and please do take those messages into wherever you are in the world and apply them appropriately. So we've had this challenge over the last couple of years around about COVID-19 and the pandemic, and the importance of pausing and thinking about how we manage the risk of COVID, yet remain situationally aware. So throughout the pandemic, we've actually been encouraging people to pause, reflect and reset around and about driving risk. So the P for pause here stands for prioritise your people, prioritise your drivers, how you manage the risk to your drivers, and how you plan daily activities to keep your people safe. The importance of assessing the risk of driving as any other risk to the organisation, but remaining situationally aware. And are you really managing driving risk as any other risk to your organisation? The importance of updating risk management plans, and then the S here, speak to your people, because their insights save lives. And I think some of the messaging in this session is relevant to you as a driver, somebody who drives for work or leisure purposes, or whether you're driving as a professional driver, and those insights definitely do save lives, and you can indeed create that safe at work, safe at home approach to managing driving risk. And the really important element here is the E of pause, to evaluate the changes you make and to share what works. And that's what we do through the SCORSA community. There are just in excess of 500 organisations now connected through driving risk within a Scotland context. We have members from out west. The membership is free, I hasten to add, funded by Transport Scotland, but you have access to these messages and you can use them within your sphere of influence and deliver them accordingly. So the whole emphasis on pause and the opportunity to reflect on how you can assist in the delivery of Scotland's road safety framework to 2030. So in front of you there, you see that whole array of road users. And from my perspective, you know, I can on a daily basis, I can be a pedestrian, I can be a pedestrian with a dog. I sometimes might go to the dizzy heights of a cycle on the rural road, but I'm certainly a car driver, and I use a car perhaps a lot less than previously, but I use a car once or twice a day, perhaps now a commute into Edinburgh twice a week, you know. So how you use the roads and what's there to be, the space is there to be shared, and how does your road user journey change over a working day. The vulnerable road users on this screen that you see in front of you are indeed the pedestrians, the cyclists, the horse riders. And how does your organisation educate people who drive for work to share that space in order they're not predisposing them to any risk? So the SCORSA project is delivered by ROSPA in Scotland, 500 plus organisations from small to multi-site, and it's all towards delivering the road safety framework to 2030, that overall vision that Scotland has the best road safety performance in the world by 2030. So SCORSA's activities and our deliverables are linked to the road safety framework, are to promote smooth driving, to educate people about managing speed, and to embed smooth driving themes into driving for work policy, to raise awareness of the contribution that managing driving risk can make towards road safety framework to 2030. And the bit that we like best is that emphasis on partnership working. So where can you and your organisation help? The interesting process with that's my son just come in to get his dog. I thought I'll just reflect on that for a moment. There is a sign on the door I hasten to add. So we are actually talking about a whole Scotland approach here. And the safe systems approach that you see in front of you is indeed also universally applicable. So countries around the world use this safe systems approach to discuss road safety issues and to have this holistic approach towards roads and traffic free from death and serious injury. So this whole piece is about this hub, and at the hub is life free from serious accidental injury, which chimes with ROSPA's mission and vision. So we have this whole Scotland approach whereby we're talking about safe road use, safe vehicles and safe speeds sitting within SCORSA's work. We also reflect on post-crash care, and perhaps it's something for you to reflect on this afternoon, is how do you equip people to deal with situation of an emergency nature? So that post-crash care, that post-crash response, what do you do in the event of emergency? So to bring it back into our simple way forward, and that safe system being underpinned by continuous improvement towards these road safety targets. And again, this is where you see the commonality with how, as professionals and practitioners, we manage other risks to our organisations. So it's that simple: plan, do, check, and act towards a continual improvement. What I'd like to do at the moment, I'd like to flag up to you that there is a road safety podcast series. It's called that very simple title, the Road Safety Podcast, that was produced by SCORSA over the last few months. It's in 6 episodes. The first episode focuses on the safe system. So if you'd like to understand a little bit more about the safe system as applied to road safety, please do find the podcast. The next 4 elements are plan, do, check and act. And the 6th element is really about how do you communicate road safety messaging, what messages work and why, and what's out there within a Scotland context and a wider world context that you can drop down into your organisation in order people understand a little bit more about road safety, driving risk and keeping themselves and other road users safe. So the plan element is very much about looking at vehicle use, and we would bring driving and riding for work in here. The types of vehicles used, the number of miles driven, the accidents, the costs, to look at the policy element of it. What do we need to have in place? How do we implement the policy? Access to driver handbooks, and that overall risk assessment process, just to identify what your issues are. And that data tends to underpin the way we take things forward within Ocean road safety world. The great thing about the individual podcast elements is they do signpost you back into SCORSA, and you can indeed download everything from a driver handbook and through to items for change that will help you get the messages across from that particular website. So then we've got to work out what we're going to do with the information. And 1993, ROSPA started working on this particular topic, and at the time we talked about meeting without moving, and there was a rolling of the eyes, and how could you ever expect to do business without moving? Well, if the pandemic's taught us anything, with the exception of those keen essential workers who've had to continue and have done so with great service to support our communities here in Scotland, UK and the wider world. Other drivers, perhaps other workers, have had the opportunity not to drive, so that all of a sudden the number of miles that are being driven by organisations may have changed. And how do we manage that now to ensure it doesn't swing back to pre-pandemic times? What else we do with information? We talk to our drivers, we identify development needs. The development needs of a young driver will be different from a high mileage driver, for example. And that whole piece about journey planning, thinking about fatigue and even where you take rest stops. And how fit and healthy are your drivers? We talk about safe drivers driving for work, but driver health and driver fitness is also a key element to be considered here. The checking element relates to checking licenses and vehicle checks daily, weekly, monthly, in accordance with a plan that ensures they're well maintained, because well maintained vehicles use less fuel. And there's another element for you to consider in relation to your overall occupational road risk plan. And then the ACT element is about reviewing progress and then celebrating that success. What have you done differently? What has worked? And what can you share through the SCORSA community that will help others to move forward? So I'm sure that a few of those words that I've just said sounded very familiar to you. You know, as practitioners, we're already considering you know, workplace transport safety and that whole piece there about safe site, safe vehicle and safe and healthy driver. And the message here is really that workplace transport and driving risk doesn't stop at the kerb. The roads are a shared space, so how do we manage the risk to ensure we're not predisposing those vulnerable road users to risk? In terms of the historical perspective, I mentioned 1993 was when ROSPA produced our guide on managing occupational road risk, and then we whiz forward, metaphorically speaking, to the driving at work guidance that was produced by HSE. And most recently what we have is, following an extensive consultation that certain IIRSM members were part of, and also SCORSA members, that driving and riding safely for work guidance that's now available on the HSE website. So again, being part of the SCORSA network helps us discuss things not only within a local context, but helps us influence across the UK and wider world. I mentioned the importance of pause, reflect and reset around driving risk, and I do like a quotation. So this quotation here kind of resonated with me as I was thinking about how to articulate the need to look at driving risk differently. You know, so we make assumptions about what we do as professionals and practitioners, excuse me. And we have that whole piece about not assuming things, you know. So here we have it, Isaac Asimov, a great science fiction writer, by the way. Your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while or the light won't come in. So if you reflect for a moment here on driving risk, and you as a driver, whether you're driving for work or driving out with work, what are your assumptions about your driving? What are your assumptions about managing the risk? And then if you're addressing, you know, if you're in the role of a fleet manager, a HR manager, health and safety manager, and you're managing driving risk, what assumptions have you made? And is it time to reflect on those and wash the windows off in order that that light does indeed come in? From a personal perspective as a driver, within the highway code, and if we were in a live situation here, we might have a wry smile. I could see the wry smiles perhaps about when people last looked at a copy of the highway code. It was recently revised to help us understand how to share the space with vulnerable road users. And if you've not looked at that, I would perhaps nudge you towards the SCORSA site, where you can indeed download a short presentation that you can use to educate your drivers in relation to those changes and what they mean. But what you see in front of you here is that personal declaration. You might not always think about it like this, but that personal declaration that you actually make when you sit behind the wheel of a vehicle. You're making that personal declaration that you're fit to drive. The suggestion is that you avoid undertaking long journeys between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning, because that's the time that people are typically sleeping. And fatigue in driving is an element I'm going to bring into the conversation in a short while. The Highway Code also discusses having a minimum break of at least 15 minutes after every 2 hours of driving. So again, within your organisation, is that mentioned within the overall driving risk approach to driving risk management? And do you proactively encourage people to stop and build that in from a journey planning perspective? It suggests if you're sleepy, stop in a safe place. Perhaps we should be having that conversation to ensure that people are well rested before they get behind the wheel of a vehicle, whether it's personal or an organisational requirement. And then finally, that 2 cups of caffeinated coffee and a 15-minute nap. Those are preventative measures, or they encourage you to stop and rest, but again, what can we do differently to ensure that we build in sufficient time for people to rest and ensure they take responsibility for their fitness to drive? And the organisations, we've recognised the responsibility that we have to ensure that the people who drive on behalf of our organisations are fit to drive and supported to be fit to drive. I really like this slide, and this really summarises the changes to the Highway Code. And when you look at this, and we do tend to use pyramids and icebergs a lot in OSH world, and I think that's why I gravitated towards this particular illustration. But it's really all about here, those with greater power have greater responsibility. So do you sit behind the wheel of an HGV, an LGV, a company car, a private car? Are you on a powered two-wheeler for work or for leisure purposes? Do you cycle? Do you walk? And how do you educate? Those with greatest power, if you have a fleet of drivers who are going out onto the road, what are they driving? Do they understand the responsibilities? And where really does your organisation fit here? Because those with greatest power are those in the largest, most powerful vehicles. So where do you as a driver fit in a safe at home perspective, but as a driver or fleet manager, where does that fit within safe at work, and how are you communicating these messages about vulnerable road users and shared space? So plan, do, check and act is at the very heart here of this. You might think rather busy, but it's great for reference purposes, this document, when you go back and sort of check off to see what your organisation is doing to expand plan, do, check, act, and really managing the driving risk. So what you see here is PDCA at the hub, and then there's an inner ring there, POPIMAR from HSG65, which is a memory test for some of us. I remember when it was published and worked with it very, very closely, and though that essence is still there within how most organisations manage the risk, health and safety risk, as any other part of their business. So within this diagram here, you see we go from the plan, do, check, act, and then there are actually 12 spokes on this risk management wheel that can help you drive continuous improvement. And Scholars is here to help you understand what's there to support you to get this journey right. So this free advice and support in each of these 12 spokes is very much there to help you. And through taking this conversation forward into your organisations, you really are demonstrating your contribution towards Scotland's road safety framework to 2030. So the next part of the presentation is just picking out some recent highlights from work that we've done. Our programme is essentially a series of 10 webinars that we run between August and May each year. We'll be kicking off again in August this year with a focus on drink drive statistics and drink driving intervention that's available from Diageo that you can then use within your own organisation. And it's very much about focusing on the fatal 4 plus other issues that are new and emerging in relation to safe road, safe vehicle and safe driver interventions. Over the last few months, we completed a research review on light goods vehicles. These are increasingly important component in online retail delivery in the UK. Significant increase in number, but there's a limited risk awareness and training that LGV drivers have in comparison with other professional drivers. So there's an increased risk of LGV drivers being in serious accidents and indeed breaching speed limits. They may well feel under pressure to drive faster for longer. So again, think about how you plan your activity. Perhaps even think here if you've got LGVs within your supply or value chain, as we might refer to, because it is a value chain that keeps your business moving irrespective of what's happening round about you. So that consideration about light goods vehicles, if you would like me to share more information and share the research paper with you, I'm happy to do so. There is that whole element there about fit to drive, where we're talking already about fatigue, sleep, good sleep, sleep hygiene, and that overall driver health piece. Just produced a briefing paper on obstructive sleep apnea to help people understand what the condition is and what can be done to manage it, and turn around challenging situations for drivers where health issues can be managed and they can still continue to drive. And then that bottom picture there, you know, where we've got the HGV, the LGV, and indeed the car at the back of the row there, the line there, is driver professionalism. How do you develop your drivers and really see driving as a profession? Because to get it right every day is a challenge, and for people who do it professionally, they should be encouraged to share that more widely. So just quickly to drop into the consideration of roads as a shared space. During the pandemic, we had a lot of emphasis on staycations and the fact that we would be sharing space with holidaymakers. So again, the focus on staying within the speed limit. Speed is another of the fatal 4. That speed limits should still be adhered to in good weather conditions. And when you have people who are driving for work on Scotland's roads, perhaps just recognising there are more vulnerable road users during the summer months, and that people need to be aware of and perhaps be ready to anticipate oncoming vehicles on narrow country rural roads as they make their way around Scotland. And again, emphasis here on staying within the speed limits with well-maintained vehicles, actually being a form of smoother eco-driving and indeed fuel efficient, so reducing, I beg your pardon, fuel costs. There will be a clip shared with the video, with this recording of a video called Passing Places that was recorded in 1973, and it was a public service broadcast that was available, and it is really interesting to go back and look at that and see about how getting the message right and then pushing it 50 years on next year, I hasten to add, because these messages save lives. And as this sort of 1973 vehicle is making its way around Scotland's rural roads, there's a lyric in the song that's don't go parking in a passing space, somebody needs that yard of space. And that's as vitally important to understand and apply now as it was in 1973. And it just shows you how getting the messages right, health and safety and road safety wise, really make them stick in people's minds. So have a look at that when you get a moment later on today. In terms of the focus on fatigue, fatigue is this significant yet under-recognised hazard in the workplace, and it really does affect workers' health, safety and well-being. So there is that challenge in relation to driving risk and fatigue. The challenges perhaps in the pandemic and people's sleep quality not being optimum over the period of time, where people have been working shift patterns, they've had physically arduous work, perhaps monotonous, unstimulating work. All these lifestyle factors need to be considered and manage the risk of fatigue as you would any other risk to your organisation. The facts are quite startling. Up to 20% of road accidents and 25% of fatal and serious injuries have fatigue as an underlying factor. Why? Because the driver was asleep at the wheel or too fatigued to respond quickly enough. That's why these accidents are more likely to result in death or serious injury, because people don't respond. They drift off into another vehicle, for example. So it's really important that drivers that are aware when they're feeling sleepy and make a conscious choice whether to continue driving or stop for a rest. And again, when you're planning people's work on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, build in the opportunity for people to be able to take that time out to rest between periods of driving. So how do you manage the risk? What you see in front of you here are these shift workers, real challenges where there is not enough time between shifts to commute, wash, eat, socialise, undertake domestic duties and sleep. Well, that's a long sentence, but if you think about, you know, even those words, are people that drive on behalf of your organisation, or are you given sufficient time to do those very basic things? How do you allow shift work to be managed, and how do you avoid that elongated shift where perhaps there's insufficient cover and people go into extra overtime and don't get quality breaks? In terms of non-shift workers, those long commutes to places of work, or those first to last appointments where you might just ask that one last delivery or that one last pickup. Is it really the most sensible thing to do from a risk management perspective? In terms of policies and communication, it's very much about consulting with the workforce to address the problem of fatigue, and then communicating those policies clearly. And again, we have content through SCORSA that can help you craft those to meet the needs of your organisation. Very much about raising awareness of fatigue, how to avoid it, steps to improve it, and also maintain good health and well-being. And there is through SCORSA an opportunity going to be arising over the next few weeks, whereby organisations will be able to put people forward for a workplace sleep programme, so they can then start to have that conversation with those who drive for work to ensure that they're managing the risk and the issues associated with sleep are understood. So please do seek to engage. And then that's all underpinned by risk assessment, particularly for safety critical activities. And perhaps we don't always think of driving as being that safety critical activity. I tend to like things that when I see them, and I picked this up, and the person that I borrowed this slide from knows that I use it very widely. And I think this is perhaps a perfect daily check on a safe at work, safe at home basis. You know, if you're hungry, angry, late or tired, don't drive. Take a break, refresh yourself, and then go forward. So how would that work in your organisation so that your drivers don't come to this abrupt halt? So are they hungry, angry, late or tired, and how can you journey plan to ensure that their workload is manageable and they're getting appropriate rest breaks, that they are eating good quality food, which isn't always possible around the road network? How do we really help people get it right so they don't come to that abrupt halt? The second clip from this afternoon is part of the Road Safety Scotland fatigue campaign, and again the link will be made available with this recording, and it is very much a themed approach to tackling these big road safety and driving risk issues, and you can use these clips to support your own in-house comms around about driving risk and work. So just in closing, we've spoken about data, the importance of data, good evidence-based interventions, the importance of having dialogue with our drivers and staff and those who organise and plan work. And then for me, there's the third D, excuse me, and that's the discourse. You know, when we speak to people about personal stories and how things can be done differently. And I'd like to bring this to a close just by talking very briefly about Zach Payne and Michael Morris. You might not have immediately recognised the names, but I'm certain you'll recognise the case, and it's the Renowned Consultants Limited case from about 2 years ago now, where they were fined £450,000 for failing to ensure that Zach Payne and Michael Morris were sufficiently rested to work and travel safely. They drifted off into a parked vehicle and were killed. So the prosecution, and the prosecution was brought by the Office of the Rail Regulator. The prosecution serves as a reminder to companies that safety comes first, and fatigue policies should be enforced to ensure their workforce is not too tired to work. And if you take time to go and look at this case, you'll see that Zach Payne was a young driver who shouldn't have been given the vehicle he was driving. He'd driven a significant number of miles over the preceding couple of days, and then was doing that drive home after a piece of work and didn't get there. So think about how planning and resourcing that you undertake help manage fatigue. Some organisations, for example, make local lodgings habitable. For long-term, they provide local lodgings to encourage people not to want to travel home at the end of a working day, and for long-term working away from home, some organisations actually provide the opportunities for families to go to this local lodgings, and they have opportunities to relax with their families without having that additional travel home. So consider these options as you reflect on how you can support the delivery of Scotland's road safety framework to 2030. So, in closing, it's a wheel within a wheel. We've looked at Plan, Do, Check, Act, and then the 12 spokes that can help deliver Scotland's road safety framework to 2030. What you see here is a junior spirograph, you know, that very simple wheel within a wheel, that Plan, Do, Check, Act, that managing driving risk as you would any other risk to your organisation, and the importance of focusing on driving risk. Because following the advent of the junior spirograph, there was this much more sophisticated spirograph. My sister had the junior one. I got the more sophisticated one because I was, as you'll be able to tell by looking at me, just that little bit older than her. And it enabled you to create all these incredible patterns. And the wheel within the wheel gets lost in this noisier pattern, you know. So I see the sophisticated spirograph there, you know, is almost like creating all these distractions away from the fundamental importance of managing driving risk as you would any other risk to your organisation. So it's important to dampen the noise down around and about driving risk for work, avoid the distractions, and to very much focus on this hub and spoke approach towards driving improvement. So I'm hoping I've helped join a few dots for you this afternoon. We're certainly here. The Scorsla Network is here to connect, learn and share through working with IIRSM members here in Scotland. there is access to case studies, what's worked for other SCORSA members. There are toolkits available. There's a comms toolkit if you want to drop Fatal 4 messages out across your sphere of influence. We've got a network of like-minded people and also provide mentoring support. So I'll draw this to a close now. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm happy for you to approach me through LinkedIn or any of the other ways that you can get in touch with me so I can support you further. So please do consider connecting, learning and sharing with SCORSA. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was a really interesting conversation. It put me in mind in previous roles where I've jumped in the car to travel several hundred miles without, you know, and then you get to the A1 and it's shut, and then you're trying to get somewhere else and you've got no map and you're not familiar with the roads and you just go round and round and round. It's strange, isn't it, that something you do so often, you don't think about it, that it becomes normal.
That's right. I think it is that pause, reflect and reset around and about your driving, and I'm certain that that your members here in Scotland, Julie, have thought about that as people have gradually begun to perhaps move from home work into hybridised form of work, and then realising that as they drive about Scotland's roads that the shape of the composition of traffic has changed quite dramatically. There are more people using active travel, perhaps fewer people using public transport at the moment, you know, so it is that constant reflection on your role as somebody who drives for work on Scotland's roads.
Thank you for that. And we've got one question and then we'll go to George to see whether he's got any questions. I'm going to have to move this down. I can't. Varifocal glasses can't actually focus on it. So this is a question from Simon. Other than the difference between Scottish law and English law regarding drink driving levels, are there any other differences that affect those who commute into and out of Scotland whilst driving for work, or those who visit rarely?
The drink drive is the most significant difference. The rest of the rules of the road are, you know, the highway code's a UK guidance document, you know, so I would suggest that it's about reading the road and being aware of the change in the, you know, the difference in drink drive limits and the potential for more and after drink drive negative testing. My understanding is there's quite a number of people who get caught more and after drinking because they don't understand that one drink is actually more than enough in a lot of circumstances.
Okay, thank you for that, Karen. George, you're now unmuted. Do you have any questions for Karen?
More a comment, Karen. Recently, since obviously people are coming back to work again, you know, since COVID and so on, I've heard more and more of Arctic drivers hounding or tailgating car drivers and forcing them off the road and causing an awful lot more accidents. Have you any evidence of this? Or
I'm not aware of the. I know that there's a general consensus and there is data that I can share, but I don't have it to hand right at this particular moment, that there has been an increase in tailgating related incidents whereby, you know, the cars behind are running into, or vehicles behind are running into vehicles in front, whether it's in queues of traffic or whether it's just failing to judge distance appropriately. But I wouldn't. Okay. I can't comment on what vehicle type. Sorry, George, but I'm aware of those types of incidents having taken an increase.
Right. Yeah. It's certainly been Arctics with cars, you know, and I've heard of 10 within the last week alone, where there's been quite a lot of damage done to the car, and the Arctic just drives off into the wild blue horizon, and nothing's done about it at all.
Well, I'm going to take that, and the next time I'm at one of the roles that I have through managing the SCORSA project is I'm on the Road Safety Framework Transport Scotland Operational Partnership Group. So I can certainly ask the question about that the next time that we meet, which isn't that far away actually. and feedback, because I think it's those have raised it here. I think it's important that perhaps we keep that dialogue going around about the data that is available, because it does help us manage the risk.
Karen,
Thanks,
I
Karen.
have one question, which I saw in the news yesterday that locally an elderly person was knocked down by an electric bike. Are there any rules and regulations surrounding electric bikes and scooters, which apparently are illegal to drive in public, but people do, or ride? I'm not sure if you drive or ride a scooter.
Yeah. Now that's interesting, because reflecting on Simon's question from earlier, e-scooters are not allowed on the public highway in Scotland. There's a difference in legislation in relation to e-scooters. What I can do is, if you would like, I can send you a link to the guidance that ROSPA have produced in relation to e-scooters, so that your IIRSM members, irrespective of where they are in the UK, can get access to that.
That would be really helpful. If you can send the links to me afterwards, I can arrange to send them to everybody to save them asking for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is, we produced some very extensive guidance on that. But as I say, they're not legal within a Scotland context at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Well, that just leaves me to thank you again for today, and apologies, we had technical issues last time, so you very kindly come back to do it again, and we got to the end today. So I'd like to thank you for that. I personally really enjoyed your presentation. It's probably something people need to be reminded of now they're venturing outside of the home working, or as you said, into hybrid working. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. As soon as I get the links from Karen, I will forward them to you. And as usual, the recording will be made available on the IIRSM YouTube channel. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending and hope to see you next time. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, George. Bye now.
Bye-bye.